According to the World Bank and United Nations estimates, more than half of the population of Nigeria has been living under the poverty line. That means more than 50% of Nigerians have been surviving on less than $1 a day. That on its own is a lot of economic pressure. But with economic opportunities receding, coupled with the burden of having to stay indoors without having little to explore the little openings available, experts are saying that a good number of Nigerians would not be able to live through the sheer psychological pressure involved. How true is this? Well, to find out more, we are now being joined from our Rise Abuja studio by Professor Andrew Zamani, a professor of psychology and director of quality assurance at the Nasarawa State University, Kefi. Among other things, he holds a doctorate degree from the University of Jos, Nigeria, and has varied work experience as school teacher, counselor at the Baptist High School, Jos, behavioral science lecturer at the Schools of Nursing and Midwifery in Jos, and is an honorary consultant psychologist with the Jos University Teaching Hospital. He also later taught at the Department of Psychiatry, University of Jos for a decade, after which he transferred his services to the University of Abuja Teaching Hospital to establish the first mental health service program in Abuja, Nigeria's federal capital. Professor Zamani, good morning and welcome to the Morning Show.
Good morning, Professor.
Are you?
Good morning. I just want to do a correction to an aspect of my introduction. I have since been reassigned to another assignment at the Nasarawa State University. I'm currently the director of the Institute of Governance and Development Studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes, Prof. Well, you're welcome to the Morning Show once again. You know, pandemics are psychological.
Thank you.
Pandemics are psychological phenomena. And we've seen how people have been protesting, some people are getting aggressive. What are the kind of things we should look out for beyond the stimulus package being provided by government? What should we be looking at on the psychological side in terms of how Nigerians are responding, particularly to the lockdown that we now have in many states of the Federation?
Thank you very much. What we see is collective hysteria, and I agree with you that it is manifesting in various forms. The most obvious is aggression and anger. And this is because, you see, the citizenry is suspicious of the leadership of this country. There is no doubt that step that the federal government has taken to curtail the spread of COVID-19 is the right step in the right direction. But I think some elements of contribution from the social environment, from the civil societies, and from various stakeholders in the country was really required. For instance, I mean, right now, whereas people are aware and they know that the COVID-19 or COVID-19 is a reality, they'll prefer to deny that reality because they are not sure they will survive the lockdown for the period of time that it has been pronounced. The antecedents are really very, very clear that in previous experiences that our leaders have appealed to us to understand with them on issues, people have been shortchanged. Relief materials that were supposed to be delivered, for instance, to victims of disasters were diverted. You cannot assure or you cannot guarantee to the layman, to the ordinary citizen on the street right now, that the economic preparation the economic stimulus that has been assured to be provided by the federal government will reach him or her. And so they would have to devise defense mechanisms. They will have to devise resistance mechanisms to ensure that their message is heard loud and clear. Now, the truth is that those of us who are on the elite side have a very big responsibility to come out to support the government, to ensure that we also provide a layer of leadership that bridges the gap between the leadership and the led. And that means that because we are very close to the grassroots, because we understand the issues at the grassroots, we can bridge the communication gap. Right now, for instance, there is a coalition of mental health practitioners on COVID-19 to enable us reach out to Nigerians through media and other facilities that are available to enable them cope or develop coping resources, provide them coping resources, develop resilience on this issue.
Thank you, Professor. Now, I think it's a great intervention to hear that there is a coalition of mental health practitioners that have come together to see what they can do about COVID-19 and the mental health effects that it's going to have on our populace. But I also don't want us to downplay how dire the mental health situation in Nigeria already is. Now, the WHO predicts that 1 in 4 Nigerians are suffering from a mental illness. But if you look at our poverty statistics, where over 100 million of us are living below $1 a day, one can even assume that that figure is higher. Now, to add to that as well, we have less than 150 psychiatrists in the country as a whole. And to add to that as well, less than 10% of the populace with mental illnesses have access to mental health care. So at a time like this, with coronavirus and the fear of pandemics and how much more that boosts poor mental health, what sort of interventions do we need to see both from government and also the private sector to cushion the effects that it's going to have on people? Because both government and the private sector can contribute right now, but what do we need to see?
Now, the National Center for Disease Control and the Federal Ministry of Health need to, as a matter of urgency, include mental health practitioners in their emergency response to COVID-19. Unless that is done, there is not going to be an official space to avail mental health services to Nigerians related to this issue. Now, we are all agreed on the fact that there is a very, very strong positive relationship between poverty and mental illness. Not because people who are poor are mentally ill, but that poverty stimulates negative mental health reactions. And therefore, the stresses that it imposes on the populace is so enormous that something has to be done. Now, we have a nation in which we do not have, we have an outdated mental health law. We have an outdated mental health law. We do not have a law that enables psychologists to provide services in a manner that protects the practitioners and protects the public. We have mental health facilities that are underfunded. We do not have the kind of stimulus package for mental health service. As a matter of fact, mental health has the lowest budget in the health sector. So these are the issues. What we need government to do is to acknowledge that mental health is a serious issue, to acknowledge that mental health needs a law to regulate it, to also acknowledge the fact that mental health needs funding. Right now, because of the manner and degree, the rate at which COVID-19 is spread, this coalition has resorted to teletherapy, counseling via the internet, counseling via mobile phones, and so on and so forth. And we are glad that the media is providing us the means by which we can further, pass the message. To be frank with you, I would expect that moving forward, there should be either a daily program on mental health on your TV station and other TV stations, on radio stations all over the country, to enable the message passed down. The Nigerian population is educable. And so if we reach out with the appropriate messages, I believe very strongly that in addition to increasing the knowledge base of the citizens on this pandemic, we will also be able to reach out to their various mental health needs for the betterment of all.
Well, Professor Zamani, you talked earlier on about defense mechanisms. You also talked about coping resources.
Yes.
Now, for the benefit of many of our viewers who will be at home and who are under lockdown and who are dealing with the psychological stress of not being able to move around, not having access to the markets, what kind of coping mechanisms would you recommend to individuals who may be totally stressed out and anxious and maybe even denying the reality of COVID-19? What kind of advice will you give them?
Now, I want us to really paint a picture of a typical family that is under lockdown. For the first time, probably, everybody is together. And probably for the first time, new families are separated by virtue of job demands. We want to imagine a situation where some people under lockdown, especially the middle class and the lower class, who are under lockdown without sufficient financial resources to meet their daily needs. It can really be very, very stressful. And, one way that you notice that is aggression and a lot of problems related to social relationships. We are expecting that under lockdown, coping resources that families would have or should develop to be able to go through the moment is to learn once again to adjust to one another. Family heads, parents should promote communication and should not arouse anxiety by the challenges that they see or the fears that they harbor. Children are asking a lot of questions. Schools have been closed down. They've been separated from their they've been separated from their friends, or from their routine physical and mentally stimulating activities. They would be bored at home. It is important that parents structure their activities at home and get engaged with them in play, and help them also to do their outstanding assignments, or even propose assignments for them to do. It is also important that people think about their physical well-being. You know, how do I, under this circumstance, keep fit physically? You can do indoor exercises. You know, like doing physical fitness exercises. You can walk around the neighborhood, of course, observing the social distance rules, because, you know, one of the problems we are going to come up with much later, if it is not already developing, is, you know, the issues of deep venous thrombosis, you know, in which, you know, you have blood vessel ruptures that even lead to death. Doctors will have to deal with that. And so, in order for you not to be a victim, it is very important that you think about your physical fitness and well-being. But it's also important to deal with your mental health issues also. And that means that people should seek to be mentally or intellectually challenged. You can stimulate a debate within the family, or a discussion within the family. You can begin to look at future plans for the family and how to go about these plans. It is mental stimulation. You know, in doing that, you can watch TV together with family members, and, you know, challenge certain thoughts, certain reports that you get, certain opinions that have been expressed, such as I'm expressing right now. Is mental stimulation. People also need to be very mindful of spiritual issues. I tell you that people who are spiritually inclined will thrive much more than those who are not spiritually inclined. I'm not talking about religiosity. I'm talking about people who have deep spiritual commitment within, who have very strong faith inclination in their lives. Because then, you know, they would be assured of support, supernatural support, you know, to be able to deal with the present and with the future that they do not see. In addition, people who are spiritually inclined have been shown to have, you know, higher degrees of empathy than those who are not. So it is really very, very important that we deploy all these qualities and resources that we have to ensure that we push through the period. But I also want to talk about the environment. Many of us have been very, very, very careless about the things that happen in our homes, especially those of us who are men. We are not really very familiar with the home environment. We do not know the conditions of our chairs. We do not know the conditions of our wives' kitchens. We do not know how our stores look like. We may know how our studies look like, or how the bedroom looks like. But, you know, a lot around us is not familiar to us. It would be nice for us, for once, to join forces together as family members to try to check the environment and to share roles, you know, on what to do in order for us to keep healthy, to keep alive, to keep happy, and to pull through the stress of the lockdown.
Okay, Professor, thank you for your viewpoint. Now, I'd like to go back to something that you mentioned and relate it as well to the post-COVID-19 mental health situation in Nigeria that I'd like us to look into a bit. Now, you spoke about the fact that mental health does receive the lowest budget when it comes to healthcare anyway. And I was doing my research and found out that in 2018, the Yaba Psychiatric Hospital had budgeted about 133 million naira, but only received 10% of that from the federal government. Do you think that there are things the government should be doing now to prepare for the post-COVID-19 mental health cases that we're probably going to have in the country? And if so, what are those things that can be done? Because at the end of the day, this situation is going to boost a lot of mental health problems across the country. And as we have said several times in this conversation, we don't have the facilities. So do you think action should be going on now, the way we're maybe building up on quarantine centers, etc.? Should we be revamping our psychiatric centers, etc., and taking the same approach that we are to physical health to mental health?
Yes, I agree. But let me backtrack a little. Post-COVID-19, what I need us to be mindful of is that this lockdown came probably at a time that many women, many adult women, or many teenagers, female teenagers and adult women of reproductive age were ovulating. So what we are going to handle will be unwanted pregnancies post-COVID-19. I assure you that our hospitals would have to get prepared. Our doctors will have to get prepared, either, to handle those who have accepted it as their fate, or those who come down with complications of attempted abortions. And again, that has mental health complications. Now, post-COVID-19, what do I think government should prepare for? What I think government should prepare for is increased engagement by mental health professionals. The advocacy has increased, and I'm glad that the Ninth Assembly is really very favorable to the advocacy of mental health practitioners, to reposition mental health by way of updating its laws. Right now, the psychology bill is before the president, and we plead that as a mental health profession, Mr. President should consider it in the kindness of his heart to append his signature to that bill, because that will give a lot of confidence, to Nigerians about these services that are provided. Now, more than ever before in the history of Nigeria, all over this country, in all states, there is a very strong coalition of civil society organizations on mental health. So government should really be very, very prepared for engagement. But beyond that, we plead with the National Assembly, because they are the ones who passed the appropriation, to please accept the budgetary proposals of mental health hospitals. Right now, our mental health hospitals are dealing with both mental disorders and substance use problems. These need to be differentiated. But as it is, they cannot be differentiated. And so we have within the Nigerian society a very high number of drug abusers who are in hiding because they do not want to be stigmatized with mental health, mental disorder diagnosis. So it is really very, very important that attention is paid to that. We want also our human resource departments to be very mindful of irritations due to stress that would emanate, or failures that will be related to the lockdown, to please, rather than fire workers who have such problems.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Zamani. On that note, we have to thank you for joining us this morning on The Morning Show. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed.